We're Robin and Steve. In the last episode, we'd sailed all the way to Mum's place, to where I grew up. So enjoy looking at the back of a head other than Steve's. This is the Royal National Park, the world's second oldest national park after Yellowstone. Just a few days earlier, our little boat was out there, except that we were going north, as slow as a snail, battling the eastern Australian current. While in this nice shelter, we had some maintenance work to do. Don't you hate it when you blow the light globe at the top of the mast? Inconvenient. It takes two of us to change a light bulb, one to go up the mast and the other to hold the safety light. Today's mission was to find out what we had to buy. Mum was super keen to go kayaking, so you get to see the back of her head again. First stop was to kayak out to our boat, and then we continued on to the mangroves. On the way back, Mum embraced the opportunity to have a kayak nap. Next morning, Steve came to meet me in the kayak. We'd been told about the local turtle. We found it. And there's nothing like a trip to the waterfall after a bit of turtle viewing. Among other things, we had gone shopping for that light bulb, so it was up the mast again. It was nearly time to go, so we made sure that Mum got one more turn in the kayak. I got to enjoy some quality cat time at Mum and Percy's place. As a special treat, we went to a cafe, and yes, the coffee was special. Mum sure deserved a special treat. See, what was really going on was that my stepdad was in hospital. So, between adventures, we spent our time in the hospital visiting Percy. And just before it was time for us to go, my pal from high school came to say hello. And that was more complicated than I'd expected.
Like I'm just...
Yeah.
Are you recording right now?
Yeah, I can edit. I totally edit.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like at you? I don't act. Am I waving out here? No.
Sorry, Fiona. I'll just stick to filming the back of people's heads. Back at Mum and Percy's place, our charts had arrived, so we could show Fiona where we'd been.
No, we stayed at Bateman's Bay, and then the next day we stayed at this little snapper island here, and then come around here, that's Cronulla.
Goodbyes are awful, but anyway, we did have to move on. We sailed into big swells, north towards Sydney. We entered between the tall cliffs of Sydney into Port Jackson and anchored at Quarantine Bay, where sailing students were being towed out for a lesson. And through our radio, we could hear that Marine Rescue were practicing their helicopter operations. We found a track to the North Head to see where we'd sailed in, and got a nice view of the Sydney skyline and where not to crash on our way out. We left at dawn the next morning to head toward Broken Bay, which is the entrance of the Hawkesbury River. The cliffs of Sydney put on a good show as we left. This thing is a handheld compass. We can use it to check that we really are where we think we are on the charts, compared with the landmarks around. Broken Bay is huge. We found a beautiful anchorage at Mackerel Bay, a tiny town accessible by ferry. We set off before dawn toward Port Stephens. Since leaving Tassie, we'd rarely seen dolphins. We were dolphin starved in New South Wales, so this was great. And then for contrast, sailing past the Newcastle area means lots of coal ships. These long passages are tiring. Day and night we take turns on watch. Finally we made it to Port Stephens. Once Steve had shaven, he was ready to hit the town and meet the locals. After hanging out with these ones for a while, we got masses of groceries and then got hit by a rainstorm, along with the locals. It was a long walk without groceries, but we were food rich and ready to move on toward Broughton Island. Or is it Broughton Island? Not sure. Past other pretty islands like this, Cabbage Tree Island. That's it, we just have to go round the corner from here, where there's even a public mooring buoy. The rains that had hit us and our groceries had also hit here, making the tracks a little soggy. This island has had a bad time, with weeds still a big problem. But luckily, the birds are coming back, because the rats and rabbits have been eradicated from the island. Late that night, this shearwater needed a little bit of help to get off our deck. We left before dawn again, this time to Toncurry Foster, our first bar crossing. And although films of boats getting wiped out in sandbars are super popular, our crossing was boringly uneventful. No massive waves to roll us over. We still wanted to make sure we'd arrive with good tides. New South Wales, with your beautiful coastlines and nowhere to anchor and rest without making scary bar crossings. But if you pick your weather and your tides well, you can enter these places without a problem. Fishing is popular here. We have a hunch that these pelicans have been fed before. Our mooring was scarily close to this bridge and in strong currents too. But with the boat secure, we were happy to kayak around the mangroves and oyster farms, and if you look carefully, the dolphins. Even better than watching pelicans is watching pelicans at sunset. So majestic and exciting since we don't have pelicans in Tassie. Next morning we took a walk out to the breakwall to check that it was all still looking mellow. It was. We headed out. Our next anchorages were open roadsteads, which basically means be prepared to roll around a whole lot and you may have to leave at any time. But this was a great sunset at Crowdy Head. It did get windy, but we were okay. We set off again before dawn towards Hat Head. Our boat is like one of those fun park tippy rooms. Steve is upright, the boat is tipped over. Steve nearly caught a massive fish. We saw it glint, it got away, but at least he could see what it was that he didn't catch. Finally we got to Hat Head, where overnight massive winds hit, 51 knots. But our anchor alarm didn't go off and we slept through it. We must have been tired. Again, leaving before sunrise, we went past the beautiful Trial Bay towards Coffs Harbour, which, although a harbour, is sometimes closed because rough weather can mean waves break over the breakwall. But this will be another uneventful bar crossing. So far we've picked our weather well, and been lucky too. Isn't this breakwall colourful? We tied on to the mooring buoy before Steve gave himself a haircut to look so fancy to go out to an Indian restaurant in Coffs Harbour, before heading off again, past the solitary islands. To keep from sitting down for hours and hours, I make sure I do a little bit of ballet bar each long passage. It's rocky, so I have to hang on tight. And it's crowded, so I have to make sure I don't kick Steve. The wind shifted from behind us to on the beam, so we could use the spinnaker. Here's another of the solitary islands. We never leave the spinnaker up for our night shifts. So with the spinnaker sock on, the spinnaker is packed away. By morning, we were nearly at the most eastern point of mainland Australia. We could see the people up there feeling so east, but we were further east than them. Join us next time as we sail past this eastern hump of Australia and start exploring Queensland. I'll leave you with some pictures of Mum in the Royal National Park. And a recap of the 442 nautical miles we sailed from Port Hacking to Byron Bay, which is 818 kilometres.